early places to have your eyeballs in this game in terms of early indicators, how the entire day might go. The first thing I'm looking at speaks directly to what you're just talking about with Kinlaw and Hargrave. What kind of pocket is Jalen Hurts looking at? What kind of pocket does he have in that first quarter? Is the Philadelphia offensive line, kind of living up to their reputation as this really good run blocking unit, pass blocking, maybe a little bit less so. And now it's up to Hurts to keep plays alive with his legs. And boy, he is fantastic at that. He really is. But how comfortable is Jalen Hurts in a pocket is one of the first boxes to check I'm going to be looking at. And then beyond that, Larry, when the Eagles have the ball, I don't know if there's going to be a more important down for the 49ers than first down. I think first down is where this game is won or lost for the 49ers defensively. Keeping the Eagles out of third and manageable, fourth and short has to be at the top of Steve Wilks' game plan, because they really are the same way the Yankees used to play 8-inning games, because you had Mariano Rivera, like God's perfect closer, basically waiting for you in the ninth. They were playing 8-inning games. That's an incredible advantage. The Eagles are playing as if fourth and short doesn't even matter or exist. That is an incredible advantage. And the way you stop the brotherly shove, this is something that we've talked about this year, is to avoid the situation that sets up the brotherly shove is coming. And that means staying out of fourth and short, staying out of third and short. And first down is the down of the game, I think, for the 49ers defense. And it's not sexy. It's probably going to be, we all talk about lean in for third down, lean in for fourth down, because these are more important than first or second. Well, not really. Not really, they aren't. One of the reasons why the Niners have been a monster this year is because of how good they've been on first and second down. If you don't see third down, that's a good afternoon for your offense. So I just think that is, as you're looking to settle into your couch and settle into the game, and what do you need to be looking at other than, wide receivers and cornerback matchups and the scoreboard? How's that pocket look for Hurts? And what are the Eagles not doing on first down? I think that's where an awful lot of this game plan has to be.
Yeah, I agree. First and second down for sure. I mean, the key guy, I think, is Nick Bosa. Because Bosa, when he's really going well, can draw penalties on offensive linemen as well as any defensive lineman in football. He puts a ton of pressure on you, and you have to clutch, and you have to grab, and you got to hold, and you got to hook them, and you got to try to cheat as much as you possibly can. We asked Nick this week about the matchups, and he's like, hey, this is a veteran savvy line, and they clutch and grab as well as any team out there. And when he was asked about how do you defend Hurts, he's like, we really have to rush as one. And what he's talking about there is that, the one thing is, to me, the wild card with the Eagles, what makes the Eagles offense really on a different level and one of the most difficult in all of football to defend is you have a running game with DeAndre Swift and Hurts onto some designed runs. They also have Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell. They can run the ball. They got a big physical offensive line. They can run the ball. Then they have two number one receivers, right? And then Goddard, who's probably not going to go in this game, is as good a receiving tight end as there is. He's 6'5" and in his prime. So you've got great weapons. You got a quarterback that can run, and you've got designed runs, and then you've got a running game that's really strong and a strong offensive line. So they check all the boxes. Where they get next level-esque is scrambling. So what Bosa's talking about is whether, they did a great job last week. If you go back and watch that all 22 against Seattle, they shrunk the pocket on Geno. As much as they rushed him, they shrunk the pocket. And almost on every sack, it was like two 49ers coming from different angles, pinching him in there.
Yeah.
They didn't give him a run lane to escape out to. And I think that, to me, is the number one thing in this game on the Niners' defensive side of the ball, is they have to rush in lanes, and they have to rush as one, and they cannot give Jalen Hurts an obvious run lane, because no matter what pass play they call, if he holds the ball more than any quarterback in football, that's why he's taken the sacks that he's taken. And that's also why he puts so much pressure on a defense. But he'll drop back to pass. He'll survey the field. He then, because you're playing, TE games and guys are all over the place, if you give him an open run lane, he is very patient and will take it and go on to the next play. So that is the backbreaker. And that's the thing that is so deflating for defensive linemen, is when he scrambles, when everything's covered and the rush is great and he's got nowhere to go with it, and then he scrambles for a first down. And that is what's so deflating. So they have to make sure that they rush as one and keep him hemmed in.
Both these teams are top 10 in total yards, in yards per play, in rushing yards. There is an efficiency that both these teams have played with all year. The 49ers very dramatically showing it to you, maybe more often than the Eagles have, because the Eagles have been in a few more dogfight games. But again, I respect the dog that wins the dogfights. 10-1, whether it be large margin of victory or small margin of victory, is 10-1. And you can't argue with 10-1 on a football field. You can't argue with a team that has yet to lose a game at home. And that's who the Eagles are. So huge week for Kyle Shanahan. Obviously the players decide what's going to happen. But when I think of, what is Kyle's incomplete? Larry, I think you and I have a tremendous amount of respect for who he is, what he does, and even the shortcoming of having not won a Super Bowl is something that you and I have always been able to look beyond to find the actual coach that is there. And I know that there are a bunch of fans that still want him to have that fourth quarter come from behind win that is absent in his resume as 49ers head coach. I can still see beyond that, though. I really do. But this is another one of those, this is a big game. Whether you want to admit it or not, it's not a playoff game, but in a weird way, it's going to affect a path in the playoffs so dramatically, possibly. It almost is. I did a segment this week, said this is the NFL's version of an in-season tournament. The in-season tournament is there to manufacture pretend consequence for disposable early season NBA games. This is a game that has consequence attached to it. And therefore, it's a big game, and therefore, Kyle's going to be under an even harsher microscope. If they lose, then he will be applauded should they win. Because if they win, it's still not the big one. But if they lose, everyone will say, well, it was a big game, and Kyle lost it. I think it's a huge week for Shanahan. And if there were 1 week in the year for one opponent that he could get 3 extra days of prep for, I think he would have chosen this game. I mean, it's set up the best it possibly could be for a game that's not a home game for the Niners, isn't it?
I mean, I think so. I mean, other than the fact it's in Philly.
Right. That's the only thing that doesn't make it the perfect scenario to go win in. You're in a tough environment, but beyond that, this is the perfect setup. It really is. Eagles coming in a little gassed and tired. You got extra rest. Everyone's got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Like you said, the entire locker room knows the magnitude of the game, but is still nice and loose. This team has played better in its 3 weeks. In the 3 victories since the bye, they've been more impressive than the 5 victories before the bye. Like the peak of the Niners season, I think, is happening at the right time to meet this game.
They're rounding into form. It's clear on both sides of the ball. They're also kind of a team that's been there and done it. So, as far as they've gone to Super Bowls, they've gone to Super Bowl, they've gone to NFC Championship games. They're familiar with, okay, it's now the real season. It's time to play. I just always felt like, teams that are on the on the come up, a young Sacramento Kings team this year in the NFL, the Detroit Lions, those teams play hard early on, trying to kind of define, who they are and kind of change their culture. There's no changing of the Niner culture. It's been established. They're playing for the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying you pace yourself, but you're keenly aware that you can't, that you have to get wins early in the year, but you really have to be peaking towards the end of the year. And I think that's, when you've run the marathon and you've been there at the end of the year and you realize, that it takes your best at the end, I think there's some tendency to let off the gas a little bit, or to, kind of take it as I don't know, maybe you're not quite as fired up in the regular season, but I just think the 49ers know that it's go time now, and they're playing at a really high level. They're I think they're focused, they're determined, but what is this game really going to determine? It's not going to determine anything really, because the 49ers still going to have like a 60 or 70% chance of playing the NFC Championship game back in Philadelphia, even if they win this game.
Right.
So I think it's more than anything trying to, serve a message to the Eagles that as good as you guys think you are, we're your equal and then some. And I think the and then some is going to be on the field on full display come Sunday.